Well, people, we're still here. We're still on quarantine, and not much has changed, at least in the world. But hey, that doesn't mean that we're not here to give you guys quality content, as we always are, because it's the Talkin TV podcast. That's right. I'm going a little bit softer, a little bit more focused for this one, but hey, you know what? That could very easily change throughout the course of this episode, because just like the movie that we're about to review, we're about to get very wild and very crazy. But of course, I am the one, the only Dom, the movie nerd, and with me, of course, is my faithful co-pilot, Chris, the TV nerd of Vanco. Chris, what's going on? Introduce yourself to the good people that keep coming back to listen to us time and time again.
Yeah, what's going on, guys? As always, it's a pleasure to be here, social distancing in my bedroom, and Dom social distancing in his. But you know, we love doing this for you guys so much that, like Dom said, nothing's gonna stop us. Hashtag quarantine ain't got shit on us.
Oh man, dude, I was worried you were gonna do that. It's hashtag Corona ain't got shit on us.
Oh, whatever. I mean, I think I like the quarantine one too. Quarantine ain't got shit on us, bro.
I like the quarantine one too, but we've been doing it for so long. We've been doing it for what, like a week now? Like, I feel like we got a thing going here, you know? Continuity.
We'll just have both going, man. Quarantine and Corona ain't got shit on us.
Whatever. All right. So, Chris, as you know, as we've made clear, there are unfortunately no new movies out yet. That could change in the coming months, considering just how many movies are just going direct to VOD. We might actually have a situation where we actually are able to review a new movie over the web.
What are you talking about, man? Homeward just came out.
Oh, I'm so glad that you brought that up. I am so beyond glad that you just brought that up. Oh my God.
I'm just saying, get your facts straight, man. You know?
You're
right.
I mean? You're right. 100%. I'm just, oh my God. I am so happy. Like,
but before we jump into what we're talking about today, I got to get your take on this, man, because this shit, I haven't even seen it, and I already like feel like I know what it is, and I feel like that's bad, you know?
Yeah. Oh, well, 100%. Well, this is the thing. You got to remember, this is the same studio that gave us the cinematic gem that is Mega Shark versus Giant Octopus and all five Sharknado movies.
Oh wow! Okay,
yeah.
So they honestly have like a bit of steam going on. If you will.
Do. Yeah, they do.
Dude, honestly, man,
to say
like,
the least,
that shit is too funny to me. Like it's great. Like, what did the Onward script leak? And they were like, "Yo, we got to capitalize on this."
No,
like, what's your take on this?
No, it's just about like these guys specialize in this. Like they've been doing this for years. Like they've got an entire itinerary of shit that just like directly rips off like all Disney stuff, and it's not even like a matter of like an Aaron Seltzker or a Jason Friedberg situation where they're just making shameless pop culture reference after pop culture reference. Like, no, these guys have like, it's almost like it's literally like Corey was saying, it's like an art how these guys rip shit off, like literally to the point where it's like I really do think that they have like an amazing team of lawyers, because oh my God, like
they must.
What? Like, I was looking at the trailer for this, and I was thinking, like, am I watching, like, an unrendered Pixar movie from the 90s? Like, what is going on here?
Unrendered, it's so true.
It looks like it. That's literally what it looks like.
So you haven't seen it, though? You've just sort of,
No, not at all. I don't know. I might have to watch it. There's not much else to watch movie-wise. No, I'm just kidding. I have a decent amount of movies from this year that I got to catch up on. I'm going to catch up on, it's Wendy. I'm going to catch up on Guns Akimbo. I'm going to watch Spencer Confidential. You're probably going to want to gouge my eyes out during it. I am going to watch Big Time Adolescence, and I think you should as well. But no, the movie that I was referencing before was A24 is actually going to drop their next movie direct to VOD. It's called Saint Maud, and I definitely think that that's one that we should both watch and review if it drops direct to digital.
I know we're recording, and it's kind of like, you know, not super professional to be like, well, let's do it on the podcast, but that's actually, like, that gets me excited, because that's actually, like, a good movie we may actually get to watch and potentially review while under quarantine. So are you down with just doing that?
Bro, absolutely. I wouldn't have brought it up if I wasn't down to do it.
Perfect. So you guys know the deal. Saint Maud. We're going to review that shit. I can't wait. That's awesome, man.
Definitely.
And you know what, Dom? If we get desperate enough, if you get desperate enough, rather, because you are the movie nerd. You know, I got plenty TV to watch. So There's nothing for me to run out of, that's for sure. But if you get desperate enough and watch Onward in solidarity, I mean Homeward, oh my God, that's just the dumbest shit right there, the naming convention.
Right? That you're getting them confused is even better.
It is even better. It even proves, so basically that even proves my point even more. If you get desperate enough to watch Homeward, I'll watch it with you in solidarity as your co-host. You make the call. I will support that decision, whatever it ends up being.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that also factors into my plan to eventually have us live stream us watching a movie, because I think that would just be great in general, and maybe just like get a bunch of other people, because guess what, people, in the 21st century with streaming, it's actually really easy to do that. But no. So I guess like we've talked a lot about kind of future plans and what we're going to do in light of everything. And I think we're doing a pretty good job of keeping with a consistent tone for this. But that's not the movie that we are here to review today, Chris.
No, it's not. And thank God it's not. Today, we are reviewing not only one of my favorite movies of all time, but one of my favorite comics of all time. Dom, what are we talking about here today on the show?
Well, Chris, we've been talking for a long time about wanting to do a retro review, a review of an older movie that there's been some time since it came out. You know, there have been legions upon legions of YouTubers that have made a career out of this. And as I was just making my top 10 movies that turned 10 years old this year the other day, I just realized, oh my God, this movie is 10 years old. This movie is officially a decade old. And it ages like a fine wine in that it somehow gets better as time goes on. And I feel like that's an attribute that you can attribute, if you will, to almost all of this director's movies, because the director is one Edgar Wright, who the fact that this guy has not gotten the cinematic praise that he deserves, I think, is so unjust. And the movie we're talking about is, of course, the one, the only Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, this, like, how do we even want to approach this, like, in order to start off? Because there's like a million things we could break down, like, just in like the opening 10 minutes alone of this movie.
Well, you know what? You're 100% right. And so I got you covered. So I've been thinking about how to approach this. And so I'm really glad that you sort of led off by saying that, like, it ages like a fine wine, because let me tell you, watching this probably about 20 times throughout the course of last decade, just, you know, it was kind of that movie that we'd put on if like we were just hanging out with a bunch of friends, you know, having some beers, just chilling, whatever. Let's just throw on something chill in the background. And also when I was even younger at the beginning of that decade, it was just like a film where I was like, oh my God, this is so fucking cool. It's such like an interesting comedy action movie. And of course that was in the height of the Michael Cera craze. So like with that being said, like, you know, like, and not to diss Austin Powers, but Austin Powers comes to mind because when I think of movies that don't age horribly, but don't necessarily age as well as I would have hoped, Austin Powers comes to mind in my own opinion. But when I speak about Scott Pilgrim, I have to say, like you said, the CGI, the editing, it all still feels so hip and so fresh. And they even cover things like veganism and, like, you know, all these like trendy, buzzworthy things that are now super trendy. Like, these guys had their finger on the pulse even before the pulse was a thing. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, definitely. Edgar Wright's always been a guy that's known exactly what he is doing. Like, you take it back to his first film that he ever did, of course, with Shaun of the Dead, and just that film being a revolutionary movie in and of itself. Like, keep in mind that this is his feature film outing too, and he almost, the fact that he pulled the equivalent of like a Tarantino with Reservoir Dogs, or a Kevin Smith with Clerks, or like a much more underrated Ryan Johnson with Brick, and like people they still don't even and still it's only now, like almost like 16 years after that movie came out, that people are finally beginning to realize that Edgar Wright is the cinematic genius that he is. But you're 100% right. Now, my relationship with this movie is a little bit different, because this is only my secple time watching it. I rewatched it, obviously, for the podcast, because, yes, I do my homework. I watched this movie for the first time. You're welcome. A couple years ago, while I was at school. This was one of many movies that I was catching up on, because the rest of my life is forever going to be an endless amount of catching up on movies that I missed, because I'm only 22 years old, and I have an entire 100 years of cinema to catch up on. But I watched this movie while I was up at school in Oswego, New York. And the first thing that stuck out to me about this movie, besides just the incredible rapid-fire energy that Edgar Wright brings to every shred of the filmmaking process, is the fact that besides this was very funny and it had like this kind of energy that I could really appreciate and relate to, it was also, what I loved about it so much was that it was different from the three Edgar Wright films that I'd watched previously, that of course being Shaun of the Dead, Hot Fuzz, and Baby Driver. And the thing that I appreciate about Edgar Wright as a filmmaker, and about every one of his different films that I've seen so far, is that even though they all feel like they're made by the same guy. Like, you would believe that Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim and Baby Driver are all made by the same person, but they don't feel like they don't all feel like like each movie has a distinct and unique identity in and of itself. And the thing that I appreciated so much about Scott Pilgrim is that it was the first movie to me that I think I've seen where it actually utilizes kind of almost video game and comic book techniques in a non-kitsch way that actually adds to the craft of filmmaking, which is something that I really hadn't seen before. And that really impressed me before we even get into like all of just the incredible humor that goes into this.
No, yeah, 100%. You're right about that. And this is sort of like a unique position for me in regards to the fact that all of those movies you've previously named, I've seen, and I've seen them a few times each. So I certainly can attest to that. And you know, speaking of Edgar Wright, before we really dive in and dissect this specific movie of his, I think the thing to me that stands out to Edgar Wright as a filmmaker is his ability to blend action and comedy. And it's not that we haven't seen that before, but he does it in such a way where the two don't step on each other's toes. Whereas I feel like a lot of other movies that try that, it gets messy. And is it more an action film? Is it more a comedy film? For some reason, Kick-Ass comes to mind. And there's nothing wrong with Kick-Ass. That's a fine movie. But I just think that there could have been something to be learned from like maybe watching like the Scott Pilgrim formula, because I think they really nail sort of blending those two things together. And especially if you read the comics, this is a perfect accent, a perfect way to bring to life sort of the story and the life of Scott Pilgrim, you know?
Yeah, it's actually funny that you mention Kick-Ass, because ironically enough, they both came out the same year, both adaptations of relatively unknown comics at the time. If I'm not mistaken, both did not do incredible at the box office. I know Kick-Ass did moderately well, but the thing that everyone always talks about that is kind of an unfair legacy that has been grafted onto the movie at this point is that Scott Pilgrim was a tremendous box office flop. Which, looking just because of like the amount of technology and effects that went into at the time, like a major comic book property, like it wasn't a Marvel or a DC movie, but even then, like you're looking at 2010, like the cinematic comic book landscape is still a completely different beast 10 years ago as it is today.
No one was talking about different phases of Marvel back then. That's for sure.
No, not at all. People didn't even know that there was an MCU like at that point.
Right.
What's interesting, I find, is looking, obviously, again, just how certain films stand the test of time, is looking back. You look at the cast alone in that movie, and that's like easily, I would say, in my mind, close to like, that movie does 300, easily 100 million opening weekend, just based on the cast alone.
Oh, now, 100% now.
Which is why, looking back, just like, it's so baffling to me. But the other reason that I'm actually interested that you bring up Kick-Ass is because, again, they both came out the same year, and I actually like both of those. I like both of these movies a lot. Like, I love Kick-Ass just as much. And Kick-Ass, I think, is unique in its own way. But I think that the thing that sets Kick-Ass apart is not necessarily the tone, because I still think Kick-Ass has reasons for why it goes for the tone that it does. I think Kick-Ass, they're both interesting in the sense of they both tackle kind of the traditional hero's journey through the superhero's stardom very differently. Like, Kick-Ass almost does it a little bit more in like the traditional way. Like, I feel like the character of Dave Lazuski is slightly more relatable than the character of Scott Pilgrim, but I think that what puts Scott Pilgrim a step above is that Scott Pilgrim has got that extra level of meta humor to it that feels so subtle that you almost would mistake it for not being there if you weren't paying extra attention. You know, like, Scott Pilgrim has like a lot of those extra details and Easter eggs in there, and not from like a comic book standpoint, from a filmmaking standpoint. Like, Edgar Wright does that so brilliantly in every one of his movies. So I think that's what kind of puts it a step above.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, I agree 100%. And so the reason I brought up Kick-Ass, and I did know, just so you know, this is like sort of my wheelhouse, Dom. I knew that it also came out in 2010. You could have quizzed me on that, and like gun to my head, I would have gotten that shit right away.
For once, Chris is batting me 100 on our movie trivia here.
Yeah, I know. It feels good right now, you know? And so with that being said, man, like, the reason I brought up Kick-Ass was because I've read through Scott Pilgrim 3 times. It's probably in my top 5 favorite comics, but I've read through the source material for Kick-Ass. I've read through it only once, but so both of these stories do hold true to their original source material, and I don't want to make this too much of a comparison, so I'm going to duck out of Kick-Ass now. I feel like I got my point across with it. Both of these movies to me hold a special place in my heart though, because like that 2000s decade to me is like where I find my comedic tone from. Like it's like those are my comedy movies. That's my comedy decade. So like those two movies, like Scott Pilgrim and Kick-Ass, like they always felt like the last of a dying breed, unfortunately, of like that like Seth Rogen crew and you know Michael Cera and Jonah Hill and all those guys. Really, just every movie was a hit and a smash. And you know, it's just like, to me, looking back on it, those movies hold a special place in my heart because they're sort of like, you know, the gatekeepers, the last of a kind. But with that being said, like, yeah, speaking of Edgar Wright, starting the podcast off, painting a picture about him, I think couldn't have been any more perfect, because the one thing I respect about him so much, especially in regards to making this movie, is that Brian Lee O'Malley, the original writer of Scott Pilgrim, was very much so involved with helping, you know, get the story beats and the flow of this film down. But obviously it was Edgar Wright's ship. But so his ability to you know, honor the source material, because I don't know if you know this, Scott Pilgrim, the final volume, came out after the movie had been released. So they sort of
did not know that.
Yeah, they sort of made like an alternate ending. But the thing is, Edgar Wright collaborated. He didn't just like sort of, you know, take George Lucas's properties and just tell him like, okay, well, you have this next trilogy, we're gonna hire these other people and do something completely different. You know, he like honored and respected the legacy of Scott Pilgrim. So fans actually, as far as I know and what I've read and looked up, like fans are actually, we have two amazing endings to something that we love so much, and a lot of that comes from like Edgar Wright honoring the source material and really knowing what he was doing before making it. Because, I mean, how many times have we seen, for example, The Hobbit, something that we thought was going to be awesome and go really well, just go awfully, and the source material just completely fall short. You know what I'm trying to say?
Especially considering the fact that The Hobbit was made by the same guy who did The Lord of the Rings. But we all know the origin story there. But yeah, so from what you're making it sound like, it definitely sounds like Wright was obviously a very passionate fan of this kind of source material. And that's what I've always liked about Wright as a creator as well, is that it's not just a situation of where he's doing a job. Every single one of his scripts he's been involved in, like he is one of the few filmmakers like Tarantino where he is involved in the filmmaking process every single step of the way. It's his own scripts. He oversees everything. Like the way he directs it, the way he edits his scenes, the way that his dialogue flows, like it all flows like there's a rhythm underlying it, like there's an underlying dynamic pentameter. I feel that's also summed up really well in Baby Driver, considering the fact that, you know, that entire movie is literally written to the soundtrack, which I find pretty great. And I feel like if Gunn hadn't done that with Guardians of the Galaxy 3 years earlier, that would have made that movie even more revolutionary. But yeah, and that's very much on point. Like, obviously, Scott Pilgrim is not so much about the soundtrack, but the soundtrack is still just as big a part of that movie. It's much more so about kind of like the video game-esque portrayal of it. And that's something that I actually wanted to dive into a little bit with you, Chris, is that obviously it's no secret that Hollywood still has yet to crack the code on how to do a good direct video game adaptation, like a direct adaptation of an already pre-existing video game property. We've seen it fail time and time again, literally to the point now where in the decade where they stand to finally actually get something good off the ground. You know, obviously the Sonic movie, quality-wise, notwithstanding, that movie did do a decent chunk of change. And, you know, they've been trying to get this goddamn Uncharted movie going for years now. And, like, that movie's stuck in development hell. But the thing that I appreciated about Scott Pilgrim is that it kind of kicked off this subgenre of movies that kind of borrowed video game attributes and incorporating them into the cinematic storytelling mode without them being direct adaptation. So I guess, like, what kind of your stance on that whole scenario?
Well, you know, and I do see a lot of what you're saying there, but the thing is, I wouldn't consider Scott Pilgrim a video game movie, and here's...
Oh, me neither. Like, that's not at all what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, but the thing about the source material is that, like, it's never really known, and to this day, I read it a third time to, like, figure out, like, wait, am I missing something? Am I you know, reading a character inside of a video game? Because he levels up and he fights like a ninja warrior, and he has powers that no human being can have, but he's also some normal kid. So I really think it's just, that's the world that Brian Lee O'Malley created, you know? And so that's why I think this movie worked, though. Because, yes, you're 100% right. Like, Assassin's Creed movie, that was a flop. Who knows what's going on with Uncharted? We can only hope that this Last of Us HBO show's good, because that game has a fan base that will die for it, you know? So it's a rocky road. The Warcraft movie, the list goes on. It's a rocky road when you talk about adapting video games into film. But the reason why I think Scott Pilgrim works is because it's based off a comic, so there is a sort of script writing that goes into it, so it can translate if it has to. And not that there isn't a script writing for video games, but it's different. You know, you have to think about the different sort of things that make it a game as opposed to like something that you watch and entertain. But like Scott Pilgrim, the way that they edited this film and the way that they like designed it, you know, it feels in certain times like you're in a video game, but then it quickly steps back and you're watching a movie. You're like, okay, that was cool. Like they give you just enough as to where they don't give you too much and it ruins itself. Like I feel, you know, Assassin's Creed and Warcraft are good examples of like it was just a little too much like a video game was trying to be a movie and it wasn't its own thing. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it makes it sound like from what you're trying to say is that they utilize certain video game techniques without completely depending on them. Like
100%.
the movie is still very much a movie first and foremost. And if anything, what I find funny is that it's not even really about like him kind of like the whole structure of him having to overcome like evil X's one after another. Like they managed to incorporate that into the film, but they make it like a quest format and they still make it relatable and natural. But that whole thing almost comes off as a side arc. Consider the fact that like every single time he feels like he's trying to figure out his life with his relationship with Knives and Ramona, and then all of a sudden these evil X's come in and it's almost treated like a joke every single time they come in, especially given how easily he defeats them. And what I also find really fascinating about that too, before we dive even deeper into that, is that the minute that he starts like actually fighting with them, the setup for it that kind of goes along with it is so subtle that it's almost like a blink or you'll miss it kind of a moment. Because when he starts fighting the first X and he starts like all of a sudden he knows kung fu, I feel like with a modern day I feel like a modern day audience would like have a little bit of a trouble. It's like, okay, how does this like dorky skinny kid, this Michael Cera guy, how does he all of a sudden know kung fu? You know, like it definitely stretches the level of believability, but I think that's where the video game elements kind of come in and save it, because that helps to like kind of explain away some of the more like logistic things. Like the movie does a very good job of making you understand, okay, this is not like the real world. This is kind of like this fantasy extra-esque comic book world, but it does it so differently than like say a more traditional comic book movie.
Yeah, so, you know, to that accord, when I was telling a friend what we'd be talking about tonight on the show, because, you know, it's quarantine, so I'm calling anyone and everyone just to fucking communicate and socialize, and so they asked us what we were recording about tonight, and I said, we're doing Scott Pilgrim, and they're like, I never seen that, what is that? And I literally just said, it's just crazy enough that it works, but not so crazy that it completely ruins it for itself. So basically, to what you just said, I feel like, you know, that is exactly kind of how I view this film. And so, you know, jumping on from that, man, I gotta say, like, I'm glad that you kind of started to touch upon Michael Cera, because I want to dissect that. Because I don't know, have you ever read the comic? Have you?
No, I have not.
Okay, well, they could not, in my opinion, and this is just one TV nerd's opinion, but they could not have cast a better actor to play Scott Pilgrim. The mannerisms, the look, I mean, the body type, the not even just like the physical acting and like the vocal acting, but just like the way he like kind of just works with the fashion style and like he plays bass just like you would imagine Scott would play bass. Like he really meshed with this character, and I think that while in my opinion the whole cast is pretty outstanding, I mean I really think if it wasn't for how well Michael Cera clicked with the character of Scott Pilgrim, this film would, because I think this is a film that's sort of grown as time's gone on. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's because of Michael Cera.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that about Michael Cera, because, again, comparing this to another one of my favorite movies that came out that same year, The Social Network, is that both of these movies kind of established one thing, which is that these were both kind of the peak of those two respective actors. Because similar to Michael Cera, Jesse Eisenberg is another actor who, when he's great, he's great. But when he's in something that is not necessarily playing to his strengths, he doesn't necessarily work out. And what I find is that, not to take away from them as actors, but those two actors specifically, they don't exactly have a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't No, Rain. I don't want to say that because they are good. The point being is that
Right,
they're actors that very much thrive in areas that play to their strengths, and this is without a doubt peak Michael Cera. And I find it funny too that some people kind of find like this is like Michael Cera's go-to, like kind of like the weak kind of minuscule, like what's the word? And like Ephraim, that's the word. Like this kind of like low down Ephraim figure who like kind of mumbles. But if anything, I find that this role is actually kind of playing against type for him, because if anything, like he's kind of taking all those personalities and almost kind of using them to make him unlikable. Because it's funny because when you think about it, like obviously Scott, even though he's your hero of this movie, he's kind of a douche when you think about it. Like he's just kind of a slacker who's in a band. He doesn't really have any other life motivations. He somehow has girls fall for him nonstop super easily and then just wants to move on to the next one because he doesn't want to actually make any commitments. And I find that really funny because the other thing too is that it's not like it's a thing of where like everyone is kind of just superfluous to this. Like everyone is constantly calling him on his shit.
Yeah.
Like his bandmates, his roommate, played outstandingly by Kieran Culkin. Like seriously, like how the fuck did Kieran Culkin not get any recognition for this? Because he is hilarious in this movie.
In my opinion, he's the better of the Culkin brothers as far as acting chops go.
100%. 100%.
You know, that's a conversation for another podcast. But Dom, you hit the nail on the head. Like you were saying, like about Michael Cera. Like, see, that's what I was kind of trying to say, and I'm glad you said that. That this is what I was kind of trying to say about like this era of comedy and these people. Like, you put another group of actors in these scripts, and it just wouldn't have worked. Like that 2000s comedy era. You know, Seth Rogen, James Franco, Michael Cera, they all did their thing time and time again. Like the stars aligned for them. You know, that was their decade.
It really did.
That was their decade.
Because the other thing too that I find funny is that and I hate to say this, but every single time those guys have tried to go kind of like outside the range of what they do best, it hasn't really worked for them. Like look at a guy like Franco, for instance. Franco is on when he is doing one of his ridiculous over-the-top comedic aspects. But with the exception, I find, of 127 Hours, everything else he kind of comes off as like almost like miscast in a way. Same thing with Rogan. Like Rogan has gotten to a point now in his career where he is just so obvious about the fact that like, yeah, I can only play this one type really well and not that much else, to the point that he's literally made jokes about it over and over again. And even with somebody like Jonah Hill, who has kind of crossed over that barrier into those kind of more dramatic roles, you still kind of see like different levels of Jonah, you know, but it's still all just Jonah Hill.
100%. And, you know, thinking about that, man, I think like this movie kind of from Michael Cera is, and I'm glad he sort of, and I guess I'm not glad because maybe it means he's not working, but at least I'm glad that he didn't put himself in a lot after this, because he really hasn't tainted his legacy too much. And if this is sort of like one of the last big movies he was in, especially as like a leading man, it's sort of a good one to like step away from and sort of rebrand on. You know what I'm trying to say? Yeah,
definitely. With after Superbad and Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist, this was kind of like the perfect movie to go out on in terms of his leading man status, because he had that comedy year one with Jack Black the year after this, which I heard was awful. Like just looking at the trailers for that movie, I'm like, yeah, I'm not watching this. And yeah, I will say this though, there was one thing that he popped up in a couple years ago. Do you remember that movie Molly's Game?
No, I don't.
So basically, the premise of that movie, it's Aaron Sorkin's directorial debut. Aaron Sorkin being the writer of The Social Network and the creator of The West Wing, where Jessica Chastain ends up starting up this underground poker playing ring that ran throughout the early 2000s, and Michael Cera is in it, and he's basically playing kind of like, the whole thing is that he's known as Player X because he's playing kind of like a big celebrity from the early 2000s who would play a lot of poker. Kind of the assumption is that he's kind of like an amalgam of like Ben Affleck and Tobey Maguire, because apparently Tobey Maguire played a lot of poker back in the day. And what I really liked is that Sorkin played around with his mannerisms and again allowed him to play against type without him feeling miscast. Like Cera actually played that part really, really well. Kind of like like he is still like this Weasley character, but he's got like kind of like this underlying edge of menace that you wouldn't expect from a guy like Cera would be able to pull off.
Yeah, no, I can kind of see. I got to watch that movie now. That actually sounds pretty interesting, because I kind of wonder what Cera's been up to recently.
Yeah, definitely. He wasn't in it for much, but like it was definitely like when he popped up, I'm like, oh wow, okay, I did not know that Michael Cera could give this type of a performance, and I'm actually really impressed that he did.
Yeah.
Oh, and obviously the voice of Robin in the Lego Batman movie, which he's just already perfectly cast for.
So he's keeping the mansions running.
Yeah, he's keeping it running.
Just not as much as he was when he was back in this, but that's fine. Like I said, I'd rather him not taint his legacy. And you know, so like speaking of Michael Cera, I mean, dude, what did you think of the rest of the cast?
I mean, like, where do I even begin? Like, I've gone on ad nauseum. Like, this is not only one of my favorite ensemble casts, this is just one of my favorite casts that I've ever seen in movies. And it's so funny, too, because, like, the movie is both, it's another one of those situations where it's like, it's both a statement on something while also making fun of that same subject, where it's just making fun of kind of the idea of hipsters and millennials and the idea of like kind of not really having a direction in life and kind of just, you know, chilling with your friends and just kind of making money wherever you can go. And I really appreciated that, but I also really admired how this movie was so blatantly mocking that, like, but in a really clever and funny way. But the cast.
Don't you think this movie was kind of like almost saying like, okay, boomer, before we even like had memes?
Oh, 100%.
Like how
100%.
finger on the pulse is this shit, right?
Yes, it's really honestly impressive. Like there's being ahead of its time, and then there's this movie. Like it's really funny. But yeah, and what I also want to point out to you, which is something that's probably going to blow your mind. So similar to what I did with Marshawn Lynch for this.
Okay.
So obviously it's pretty standard that like pretty much every single member of this cast, even if they weren't a superstar at the time, is a superstar now. You know, Kieran Culkin, obviously, with his work on Succession. Anna Kendrick as his sister, which is insane. Like, because this movie was 2 years before Pitch Perfect, and now everybody knows who Anna Kendrick is. Brie Larson, Mary Elizabeth Winstead, Allison Pill as the drummer in his band, Johnny Simmons as just the what was it, Young Neil or something like that, who just kind of echoes everything that other people say. And then that's before we even get to the evil X's, which Brandon Routh, Chris Evans, Jason Schwartzman, Mae Whitman, the voice of Katara from Avatar: The Last Airbender, how the fuck, like, just that cast alone is already mind-blowing enough, and how well each actor works with the part that their cast has. But his girlfriend, Knives Chow, do you know who that actress is?
You know, I was gonna say, is she the only one who didn't go on to do anything? Although I know
What's funny, it's funny that you mentioned that, because I was doing a little bit of research and I'm like, that face looks really familiar. What have I seen her recently? And I'm gonna give you a hint. Ready? She's one of many women in an ensemble show that's primarily women that you have fallen in love with recently.
Who is she on Westworld?
Nope, not Westworld.
Oh,
primarily
shit.
women.
Oh, whoa. Oh, she's on Glow, isn't she?
She's on Glow. She's. I think it's the fortune cookie. I think was the nickname that they gave to her before she changed
She's pissed about it the whole time.
Yup.
Oh, that's so cool, man. I didn't know that.
Yep.
That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, I didn't either.
Wow.
I didn't either. I had to look that up. I'm like, oh, that's why Knives looks so familiar.
Damn. So the Scott Pilgrim alumni at their 10-year, graduation ceremony are all doing some pretty good shit, aren't they?
I literally just want to watch the 10-year reunion for this movie just to see, like, all those people on stage, just to see how many of them would come back. Like, and then for people to realize, oh shit, this is how many people were in this movie 10 years ago. What the fuck?
Damn, dude. Wow, that just blew my mind.
Yeah.
You know, that gets me thinking, how is this movie received by the Oscars? Because it certainly is a different...
I'm pretty sure it got zero, like maybe a few technical nominations, but that was it.
Not even the technicals, though, if anything? That's fucked up.
No, I'm pretty sure they lost. It was primarily Inception for the technicals, and I know Social Network obviously won score for Reznor and Ross, because, oh man, I still can't wait for you to watch that movie just for you to listen to the score alone. But yeah, technicals was mostly Inception that year.
Damn, man, because to be honest with you, like, this editing style feels so hip. It feels like everything Suicide Squad tried to be but failed. It feels like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it feels like...
Yeah, it might be the best editing that I saw from it's a toss-up between that, Black Swan, and The Social Network, but like this, it's very, very strong contention for the best editing of the year, no question.
Crazy, man. Now, if you ever get bored and you need something to read, let me know. I'll loan you my volume of the first Scott Pilgrim. And that's, I mean, read them all. They're all great. But the first volume, in essence, is amazing because, dude, never have I seen someone perfectly recreate a shot from a comic book, which obviously it's a still because it's drawn on paper, but do it so perfectly as to where it's like, holy shit, like, that is the only way you could bring this thing to life, let alone how they nailed the set design. And I don't know if you know this, but that's because, like, those sets were actual locations. Brian Lee O'Malley, the writer, actually grew up in Toronto and actually, lived in that neighborhood and had a friend who lived in that basement apartment that Scott lives in. But if you look in the comic, dude, it is exactly the same. It looks exactly the same. Like it almost feels like the cartoons are walking out of the page. Like I've never seen something like that. So that the reason I'm bringing this up is because, like, you know, we're speaking a lot about like the cast and Edgar Wright sort of respecting the source material and how great he is at that. But as a director, to bring to life shots from a page and make them feel realer than any other adaptation I've seen. Like, this dude might be one of my favorite directors. I never even realized until this conversation.
He's easily one of my favorite directors. I have one movie left of his to watch, that being The World's End, the conclusion to the Cornetto trilogy. He was supposed to have a new movie come out this year, which was one of easily my anticipated movies, Last Night in Soho, which was also going to be his first attempt at tackling both time travel and periodic gothic horror, which I was ecstatic about because I always love it when two things always make me ecstatic when I hear that a favorite director of mine has a new movie coming out. One, when he's teaming up with a new actor that he's never worked with before, or two, when he's tackling just a completely new genre that he's never tackled before. And Edgar Wright hasn't tackled horror since his Shaun of the Dead days. But the thing about Shaun of the Dead, obviously, that sets it apart is that it is very much a horror comedy.
Yeah,
but
I wouldn't call it a true horror by any means.
No,
it even
not at
feels
all,
like
but,
an action film at some parts.
At some points, yeah, it's to me like the best made zombie movie since Romero's original Night of the Living Dead. But yeah, no, Edgar Wright is a filmmaker first and foremost, and like you never lose track of that throughout any one of his movies. Like you can tell, like there is like the cinematic language that you see throughout the best movies. Like he is following that to a T while implementing his own like style. It's one of the reasons, and again, I'm so happy that he finally had a big commercial success on his hands. It's long past time that he got it. That Baby Driver in summer of 2017 was so successful.
Yeah, man. You know, his style, I'm glad you touched upon that, because now I honestly have seen a lot of his movies, and there's really no one else kind of doing that. Am I wrong in saying it?
No, you're not wrong at all. Like there is, I think some people have called him Tarantino-esque, but that's like every person that has made a movie post Pulp Fiction has tried that similar to that vein. But like I wouldn't go so far as to that. Like to me, like you look at a Tarantino movie, you look at an Edgar Wright movie, it's like a completely polar opposite style of filmmaking right there. If anything, Edgar Wright is a hell of a lot more restrained than Tarantino is, and Edgar Wright, like the thing about it, like I said, it's his passion, I would say, for music.
His penchant.
kind of how he utilizes like the rhythm of that. Like obviously, you know, when you make music, there's a beat to it, right? And when he does that, like you can feel that with every frame. Like just watching like a minute of this movie, it feels so perfectly choreographed. Like you feel like you're watching the best version of the screenplay, like on the page, you know, like I literally feel like as I'm watching any one of his movies, I can almost see the screenplay going up next to it. And it's like, okay, it's perfect. Boom, boom, boom. All the beats are hitting when they need to. All of like the sequences are hitting when they need to. You know, you and I talked previously about the screenwriting structure, you know, the 8 sequence structure, and how each one of his movies almost fit into those, like almost to a T. You know, they never overstay their welcome. They're all just about clock in at 2 hours. There's never a bit of like excess dead weight in his movies, you know. Like every single time you feel like you're starting to get just a little bit bored, his movies throw in something else to wake you up and be like, whoa. And in this case, it's the evil X's. But yeah, like just bringing it back to this movie, I love how this movie is still like again, it's a love story at the end of the day, and that is the primary focus here. But it does it in the most millennial, hipsterish way possible. But it actually makes it relatable, because I've gone on record to say that I'm not a fan of romance in movies. Almost every single time there's a romantic subplot in a movie, I roll my eyes at it. I go out of my way to avoid just romantic movies in general, because it's just a genre that has never spoken to me. But with this movie, I'm like I can't stop laughing at every single attempt, because this movie is going so out of its way to just mock kind of like those types of conventions when it comes to romance. It's great.
Well, that's the thing. Like I feel like most movies try to get the sort of moment and growth that you get at the end when Knives is sort of like, go to her, you know? Like I understand this was a nice time in my life, Scott, but she is who you're meant to be with. Like, and that felt so natural, whereas we've seen that moment before, and that's why I bring that moment up. But very seldom have I seen that moment done in such a way where it felt like it was meant to happen and it couldn't have happened any other way. Because that is a very like sort of generic kind of of ending to a romantic film, so I can sort of understand your problem with romantic films. They kind of always sort of end one of two ways. They either die or, an ending like that happens. You know what I mean? But like...
Yeah, there's not a lot of flexibility when it comes to it.
Exactly. But the thing is, I think that like there wasn't a lot of flexibility in this love story, there being a love triangle, but the way it wrapped up was, it was just so elegant, man. That's the only way I can describe it.
It was really well done.
Yeah, and
it's just a well done, well thought out story and movie.
Yeah, and I think again that's because like Edgar Wright just respect, man. He seems like a respectful person to this source material, and I think it really shows. And another thing about like sort of how I'm painting this like picture of his respect, and the reason why I feel so strongly about this is because even though Scott Pilgrim is a comic, so you read it, right? Music is so prevalent in that comic. And I love how they took the songs with the same rhythm and the same like cadence that you read the words on the page and put them to this only what you would imagine their band sounds like backdrop. Like, dude, sound in film, this is a master, this movie's kind of a masterclass in everything, but like scoring and composing to fit the feel of the film and accent the characters, but not steal the moment, just accent them. Like, goddamn, dude, I think anyone in film school should watch Scott Pilgrim vs. the World because, I mean, am I wrong? Am I just too in love with this film?
I couldn't agree more. Now, if I'm going like certain different levels of film school, I would still recommend Shaun of the Dead over Scott Pilgrim, only because Shaun of the Dead is kind of a little bit more basic when it comes to something that like film students could watch as like an introductory movie and kind of see like the basic good filmmaking techniques. Scott Pilgrim, the only reason why I would maybe recommend against that is because of the extensive amount of visuals that go into that movie, but just from like a basic storytelling, like a storytelling example, if you will, I would 100% recommend it. Also, it was a really good means of adaptation.
Yes.
Like, again, I didn't read the original source material, but even I could get the sense of like where, oh yeah, this is absolutely doing everything that it needs to do in terms of the adaptation. But I want to actually bring it back to the romance for a second, because this is something that I've seen a couple of times, and you would probably have a better idea of this in context of it, but it's just kind of, again, it's something that kind of baffles me. And if anything, I'm kind of happy about it because, again, I love points and movies that make me think, which is where the idea of, did Scott do the right thing by going after Ramona at the end and not going back with Knives? 'Cause I don't know if you knew this, but there was an alternative ending shot where he did end up staying with Knives. And
oh, really?
It's funny. Yeah, there was. And it's funny when you think about it, because the idea being that, obviously, he fought so hard for Ramona this entire time. He shouldn't just let her go so easily, all that. And Knives kind of coming to terms, her being mature about it and understanding that Scott makes a decision to let her go. But the idea also is still there that Scott did dump her. He is still kind of a terrible person. If anything, his idea to settle down with Ramona is an example of him finally just realizing that he just does need to settle down before he kind of hurts somebody else the way that he hurt Knives. And so this might be the only part of the movie where kind of my rational brain is kind of overcoming my suspension of disbelief, and I'm just kind of questioning it, being like, did he make the right move at the end?
Yeah, I mean, I guess so, right. And I understand that. And it's, I don't want to spoil anything. I think you kind of should read the comic. It's a quick read. It's really awesome. And there is a completely different ending. I'll say that the alternative ending is more along the veins of the ending the comic book takes. But that's kind of why I like the way the movie sort of did something a little different. And so, yeah, man, I agree with you. I think that, it is still kind of fucked up that he goes with Ramona, but there is character growth there. But I think it's okay. And in my opinion, the reason why, I don't kind of wake up from my suspension of disbelief and be like, oh, wait, this shouldn't work, is because like you said, Scott is kind of a shitty person, I mean, he's kind of an asshole millennial just trying to get by. So the fact that he at least even changes to me and kind of not as much as we would hope, but again, he's a shitbag millennial. So what do you really expect from that kind of person? You know what I mean?
You're 100%
so that's why
right.
I'm okay with it, but does that help, or do you still feel the same way you feel?
No, that does help. That does help definitely a lot. And also, again, I just give props for him to finally be the one nerd that actually bags the Manic Pixie Dream Girl.
Yeah.
Because, Jesus, I've chased Manic Pixie Dream Girl after Manic Pixie Dream Girl. And damn, I don't know what it is about them, but they are tough ones to net. Oh my God.
Yeah, man.
And then whenever they finally do settle down, they always settle down with the last person you would expect. And it's really? What?
They settle down with Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, I feel like it's a cautionary tale, if anything. Like all these movies and properties, it's like, guys, don't chase the manic pixie dream girl because they're gonna pick somebody else and it's not gonna be you. And then if you try to keep chasing them, they're either gonna friend zone you or never speak to you again. So
I know that all too well. And
Yeah,
so
me too.
let's move on.
Story of my life right
with
there.
that being said, we kind of have been singing this film's praises, and we only have a few minutes left, so I feel like we kind of have the perfect amount of time. If there are any gripes with this movie, anything that we kind of, just to show that we're not super just biased about this film. Like, was there anything, though? Because, like, nothing comes to mind. But, hey, maybe you'll bring something up that I was like, you know what? They could have done that better.
I guess, again, these are going to come off.
You don't have to
as
find
nitpicks.
something, though, if there is
Well,
anything.
no. Well, because there are a few.
Okay,
There are a
yeah,
few
shoot.
that I did legitimately find besides the ending. But again, I will admit that was just mostly just kind of my rational brain poking it. But and again, these are all just personal bullshit gripes. But not enough Chris Evans, because Chris Evans as Lucas Lee was just so amazing on so many different levels. And the fact that he got cast as 1 year later as Captain America is freaking hilarious.
So funny, right?
Yeah, but also, I don't know, like, again, maybe this is just me, but considering the fact that the other, because the twins technically count as one entity. The other, actually, wait, no. The one guy, Chris Evans, Brandon Routh, Mae Whitman. Oh, no, the twins are 5 and 6.
Yeah,
I
they
guess. Is that the twins kind of just don't really have a personality. They're just kind of there as DJs, and they're just kind of like a mini boss to beat before like the main boss at the end, which is the Jason Schwartzman character.
That's true.
So yeah.
Well, in the comic
So
they get explored more, but to be honest with you, I think, like you said, this movie doesn't overstay its welcome. So I'm okay with that fact. I think that this was always a tall order because, like, it's so since, like, page 20 in the comic, like, oh, you have to fight the 7 evil X's, and that's, like, a lot of fucking pages, So, but I understand.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of backstory to get into. But also, again, like, if we could just touch on the comedy for a second, just, like, I love this movie's sense of humor and its sense of stylization because, again, this movie is so self-aware of the fact that all these characters are millennials. And it's like every single time Scott's in, like, a life-threatening scenario, the rest of his friends are either just like, go fight, and they're just like, oh yeah, you okay? We're just kind of gonna be over there, just like grabbing a coffee, and it's always hilarious. And, like,
dude,
because every single time you feel bad for Scott, the movie always pauses for a second to remind you of like what a shitty person he is. Like, they remind you, it's like, oh yeah, he broke that girl's heart. He broke that girl's heart. He broke that girl's heart. And it's like, oh my god. And then just, if we can talk, like I said, besides Lucas Lee, just the Brandon Routh thing and the Brie Larson thing was so good because Brie Larson, first of all, I think that's the hottest that Brie Larson has ever been in anything she's ever been in, because that's before Brie Larson turned into just being annoying in real life and in movies. But oh man,
I agree.
So many great things.
But hey, here's the thing. So there's 2 lines before we get out of here that sort of have always stuck in my head from this movie, and one of them comes to mind because you just kind of brought up like how well they portray the millennials. And so when Aubrey Plaza's character says to the lead singer of the band, Scott's ex-girlfriend, after Scott literally punches her boyfriend into pieces, the vegan guy, she goes, "I'm mad for you." Like, it's so fucking...
it's so good.
Millennial,
it's so good.
dude. I'm mad for you.
And then when they bring in the vegan police, portrayed by Thomas Jane and Clifton Collins Jr., like 2 of the best cameos that I think I've ever seen. Like, that was great. And then he loses his vegan superpowers. I think, like I said, there's so many different lines. I kind of hate now when there's a movie that's got so many great lines that you just want to memorize all of them, because I've always been terrible with remembering movie one-liners. Like, every single time I try to quote something from a movie, I always fuck it up, and it pisses me off because this movie is so chock full of them. Like, there's a great one-liner every other minute.
There really is.
And I think that one of my favorites, though, is when Brandon Routh is explaining all of this, like, subtexts and, like, microscopic amazing things about being a vegan. And then Brie Larson just cuts it and it's just like, basically, being a vegan just makes you better than everyone else. And I was just dying at that line. Like, that line's great.
Dude, fucking hilarious. And then the last line that I really loved was in that final boss battle, when Scott gets a second chance, when he uses his final life and he gets the do-over, which I love that whole idea, by the way, that whole sequence. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's just so crazy enough that it actually works. And so Scott punches him and he swallows his gum and he goes, "I just swallowed my gum." and he gets all pissed off, and he's like, "That's gonna be in my intestinal tract for 7 years."
Yeah,
that
yes,
made me laugh.
yes. That's
so
what I mean.
Hard
Like, I
10
feel like
years
I
ago,
got,
and still to this day, it cracks me up. I think that's a testament to the staying power of this film. You know.
like just the opening lines for this movie, like how they interact with each other, like his opening interactions with Wallace, which is like, again, can we both agree that like Wallace is the funniest character in this whole movie?
Dude, no argument there.
Yeah, like honestly, Kieran Culkin deserved a supporting Oscar nomination for that performance.
For
Like
real.
he's so goddamn good at that. Yeah, how is he not the more famous Culkin brother? Like seriously, especially like you watched a couple of episodes of Succession, like you know how good you see how good he is on that show.
Dude, it's next on my list to catch up on after Ozark, because I just can't wait to get back now, especially watching his performance here. Like I forgot how magical he was on Succession, and he's so underrated, man.
Yeah, there's another movie that he was in the early 2000s that he got a Golden Globe nomination for called Igby Goes Down. If I'm not mistaken, John Cameron Mitchell directed it. And like I kind of don't really care about John Cameron Mitchell as a director, but I want to watch that movie exclusively because I know Kieran Culkin's in it.
Yeah, dude, I mean, hey, man, text me that when we get off the pod so I can remember it. I will check that out. Now, with that being said, Dom, I mean, I'm ready to move on to, ratings and final thoughts on this if you are.
Me too. Final ratings, final thoughts, absolutely. So you want to kick this off since you're kind of the bigger Scott Pilgrim head here?
Yeah, I'll kick this off. So, before I really was into movies and TV the way that I am now, I kind of always, had comics. And even before that, I had Scott Pilgrim, and I'm just glad that as I've learned more and as I've progressed and I can see sort of all the different, like me and Dom did this crazy screenwriting class the other day. It was awesome and it really opened my eyes. And I'm just glad that some of the movies that I really loved haven't fallen by the wayside. And Scott Pilgrim is one of those because it has so many levels. You can watch it for technicals. You can watch it just for fun. You can watch it to learn something about filmmaking, and it's brilliant. And I love this movie, and I'm gonna give it a perfect 5 stars because it's a perfect movie, guys. Just watch it.
Yeah. This movie is brilliant on every single level. Again, from a technical aspect, from a visual effects aspect, from a casting aspect, from a writing aspect, from a comedy aspect, from an action aspect. Like, I don't think when you talk about a movie that you could recommend to anyone because it's got everything in it that you could love, I think of 2 movies. I think of The Princess Bride, and I think of this movie. And I think the only difference being that The Princess Bride has the fantasy element, and this kind of has the video game element. So what I will say is that while this movie may have come off as niche when it was first released, I think that in today's day and age, I feel like if you showed this to kind of a modern day viewer who really doesn't I'm not going to say have the love of kind of comic book properties, but I think comic books have become so mainstream in and of itself in today's culture that they're not as hard to sell as they were 10 years ago. But with all that being said, this is a movie that, to me, in my mind, anybody can watch and get something out of to enjoy. And so, yeah, I did originally have this at 4.5, but yeah, no, the more that I think about it, this is a 5-star movie. This is a perfect movie.
Hey, we would have high-fived as per show tradition.
But we're stuck
in quarantine. But that is a high 5, double 5 stars. And Dom, we also
Air 5.
Yeah. Air 5, man. Air elbow, dude. You got to be safe, social distance. Now, Dom, I think that they're listening to our show right now. So I think,
I think
they sort of enjoy this as well. So we're doing more stuff, aren't we? More things that they can potentially enjoy and places they can find us, right?
Hell yeah, absolutely. So guys, guess what? That thing that we've been saying we've been trying to do for months, we finally did it. We have a YouTube channel now. And it's pretty much the same name where you can find us on all different social media platforms. You can find us by just typing in Talkin TV, no G, into that YouTube spacebar. We are going to be uploading, for right now, we're going to be uploading our older episodes on there with kind of the audio bars that you see with the clips. Follow us on Instagram, also at Talkin TV, which is also on Facebook. What's it called? It is audio bar covers over some of our older episodes. So if you missed some of our older episodes, but you want to see it in a whole new different way, head on over to the YouTube channel. Give it a watch. We'll be uploading those progressively throughout the coming weeks, hopefully throughout this quarantine, which will give us plenty of stuff to do in the meantime.
But we also have other kind of stuff down the pipeline for YouTube too, right? Or am I wrong about that?
No, yes, we do. Yes, we do. And those will obviously be planned out as we get closer to the deadline. But yeah, we have some ideas. We have ideas for individual reviews. We have ideas for trailer reactions. We have ideas for maybe covering stuff outside the realm of movies. You know, we've said we've wanted to expand it to TV, and we've done that a couple times. But why not expand it to other stuff? You know, we like a lot of comics. We like a lot of video games. We like a lot of different media properties.
Yeah.
And you can get all that by subscribing to Talkin TV on YouTube. But also follow us on all of the different social media platforms that we're on. And of course, don't forget to actually listen to the podcast, which is still on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Radio Public, Pocket Cast, Google Play, Stitcher, and anywhere but SoundCloud where you can listen to podcasts.
Yeah, and so just in case they want to follow us, maybe they've always listened on Apple or Spotify or Stitcher or any of those other places, but now they're ready to take the next step and sort of type in on social media and click the follow button. What do they do for that, Dom?
Talkin TV or Talkin TV podcast, no G, all one word.
Awesome. And with that being said, Dom, I hate having to make you talk so much at the end here, but like I'd like you to let the people know where they can find you if that's...
Well, hold on. First, you keep making it sound like talking is something that I don't like doing already. You make it sound like it's this big burden that I have to overcome.
True.
It's like, come on,
I guess
guys. Anybody who knows me at this point should know better.
I guess it's just because there's a little bit more to say, and this is always sort of your bag, and with the YouTube thing, you know, that's what I mean by a little bit more to say, but all right, yeah, no, Dom, where the fuck can people find you? Because you talk all the time on social media. You're always posting. You always have something awesome to say about a film, a movie, a review. Where can they find all that?
Well, forget just social media. I just like talking in general. But you guys can find me on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all under my one name, Movie Nerd Reviews, all one word. I actually have a new video coming out this coming Friday on the top 10 scene-stealing supporting characters in TV shows. So if you want to know who my 10 favorite scene-stealing supporting characters from my favorite TV shows are, we will have to tune into my YouTube channel, Movie Nerd Reviews, on Friday morning in order to find that out.
Ooh, I'm gonna watch that. That sounds good. I like that idea. That's a good idea.
Be very interested to see your thoughts on them. And I also kind of want to see your list, because I definitely know you've got enough because of the amount of TV that you've watched in the comments when I post the video.
Is it okay if I steal that for our channel when we start getting into those kind of videos?
Absolutely,
okay.
But first I am making it a legal requirement. You've got to leave your 10 in the comments when I post the video.
Okay, dude, I will, and then I can explain them in our video on our YouTube channel.
Yes, absolutely.
Because you're posting this on your personal YouTube channel, obviously.
Yes,
cool.
I am.
Yeah, and so with that being said, I also post things on personal channels too, guys. You can follow me at Christian Ivanko. That's my first and last name. Don't wear it out. I make music. I make other podcasts. Head over to my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. There's always a nice little link you can click, which sends you out to all those different spots. It's super easy to find. And, you know, if you like me, if you like what I do, I'd appreciate you supporting, because it means a lot. And it also really does mean a lot that you guys have listened to this show. We are so humbled and incredibly thankful for, especially this past month, aside from this whole 5-month journey so far. Like we've grown quite a bit, and that's all because of you guys. So thank you for being here, and we hope you enjoyed our retro review. There's many more to come, and we have a lot of ideas. And as always, we'll lob it up to a poll for you guys to get involved. You all voted for Scott Pilgrim this time, and we'll see what wins next time, you know?
Absolutely.
And with that being said, there's always one way, the only way, the most important way, I think, that we end this show. Dom, is there anything you would like to leave the people with here today?
Watch more fucking movies, people. I didn't have a preamble that time. We out.